Go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Room Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Room Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Room Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by TC and Friends Monday Night Musing. This is episode 12 of season 2. Sometimes I think to myself, how in the world did we get to episode 12 already? Season 2. How did we get to season 2? How in the world did I even get a channel? I mean, this week is this last week has been a bit of a conundrum for me. So last Tuesday was the 3-year anniversary of the launch of the show. Yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of my former employer frog marching me out of the sheriff's office detention center, putting me on admin leave for my dangerous rhetoric in my content. So that's a shout out to the show that Daniel and Brently do. I want to say it's every week, but they've got a lot of content, and I listen to so many podcasts. It's really hard for me to stay on top of all of them. So they put out a lot of content all the time, and so you need to listen to it because, well, it's dangerous. And the reason why I like their title so much is some of you are familiar that in my battle with the city of Albert Lee's city attorney, Kelly Don Martinez, one of the people who filed complaints against me with the FBI and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And then when that didn't go anywhere with my employer, when I finally met her face to face for the first time, when she subpoenaed me to be a witness against my friend who I was been defending against the COOF mandates here in the state of Minnesota, I told her that I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that she found me to be a threat, and that I would never in any thought process ever do anything to hurt her or anyone else. And she told me that I was out of line because my rhetoric was dangerous. And I think we're going to have to ask Daniel and Brently to define what dangerous rhetoric is, because rhetorically speaking, I don't know that rhetoric can be dangerous, which is, I think, why the name of their show is ironic and sarcastic all at the same time, and maybe intentionally obtuse. But these guys are a absolute joy to listen to. I get a little fiery at times, and Brently is known to master in the art of sarcasm if you've ever interacted with him on social media. So you guys will enjoy this show. I'm waiting for all of our I'm not bringing you guys in until we have at least 150 people watching, so we might be here a while. Where are your friends and my friends, guys? I don't understand. I think we lost them all. They're like, no, gosh, we're going to put these 3 people in a room together. This is going to be a crap show. But anyway, if you're watching this back on playback, there's a super thank you button down there. You should hit that. If you're watching it live and you have a question for these 2 yahoos, and you want me to see it in the chat, the best way to do that is with a super chat. I do try to interact with all comments as they're coming up. And if you haven't yet, check out the coffee. Best coffee you will ever have. And as my friend Bootleg from the Not a Real Libertarian podcast pointed out, I'm always shilling to try and get people to buy my shiny sack. I don't know what he means by that. but he lives in Tennessee, so you know how those guys are about weird sexual innuendos. And then, of course, I have my mugs and my other merchandise. And I don't have any fundraisers going on. My fundraiser for Bob and Sue ended yesterday, and we'll be getting them the proceeds there from that couple of month long fundraiser to help their son Garrett after his PTSD related incident back in the early part of December. He's touch and go on his recovery, but he is back in Minnesota from Virginia. And so, without any further ado, we are going to bring these two masterful podcasters on. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
How's it going? Thanks for having us.
Oh, no, thanks for putting this together with me on short notice.
He's Dan. I'm Brently.
Okay, Brad. Just so everyone knows.
Just so everyone knows.
And it wasn't that short notice. We had some heads up. So we've definitely done more short notice live streams. Like sometimes Carrie will just bring us on to rescue her show, and her like guest backs out. Carrie Smith.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
Carrie. I've had her on a few times. So
She's
awesome.
funny. We love her.
She's a lovely person.
You're cracking me up when we're in the backstage when you're doing your intro. It was funny.
Yeah,
I told you my intros are rambling screeds more often than not. So we connected because of Joshua Slocum from Disaffected, and we connected through Twitter and all of that. And so let's just bury the lead, get it out of the way. You guys are known for your show, Dangerous Rhetoric, which is not in keeping with the norm of a particular culture that you guys come from.
I mean, I don't know if I would say we were known.
I mean, it definitely doesn't keep up with the norm of the culture we live in. We're in New York City right now.
Yeah.
I'm from Elizabeth, New Jersey originally, Brently, Pennsylvania. I guess where you are from is a little more red. Where I'm from is super liberal.
No, Pennsylvania's kind of blue now.
That depends where. I don't know about Bucks County.
Yeah.
You're from Bucks County?
From
I
Bucks
am.
County.
That is the Alabama
Yeah.
It's
of
not.
Pennsylvania.
It's like 40 minutes north of Philly.
I used to make fun of it too.
It is the Alabama.
It's beautiful there though.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
John Ziegler has a show called In the Interest of Hindsight, which is all about his dive into investigating the Sandusky debacle. And I heard Ziegler on talking to Tom Woods about his podcast and how much it impacted his career as a journalist, even as a sports journalist, because he went to bat for Paterno and then ended up going to bat for Sandusky, and people, of course, turned on him immediately. And Daniel, that's one of our viewers is actually on the show. This is some sort of weird. It's going to cause some sort of psychic feedback. It's.
I just wanted people to know I'm also here in the chat, looking at the chat. So
somebody's got the chat open.
Yeah, so people chat. We do have a few viewers now. We don't have the 150, so you guys aren't going anywhere.
Girl, that's fine. Our premieres,
failed us,
when we hit double digits, we're happy. So it's all good.
Yeah.
No, if I get 10 live viewers at a time, I'm just like thrilled.
It took us a while to get that.
We were just chilling at 0 for the longest time.
Well, we would do mostly premieres, live stream. Typically, we could get a few people in there, but we've done a couple that did well.
YouTube promotes the live streams. It definitely likes them better.
I just like it because people are more prone to saying things that will embarrass them in the future on a live stream, and me included. So
it's a different vibe. Like our formal episodes, we like to pre-record because we want it to be that one-on-one conversation between us and whoever we bring on. And, as great as the chat is in a live stream, they will interject, they'll ask questions, and, who knows where the conversation could go at that point. But live streams are a whole nother thing because it's like, we'll usually organize those around like a central sort of question or theme, but it's organized chaos. You don't know where it's going to go because there's a lot of people we bring on at once. So who knows what they're going to bring up. And then the chat brings up things. So
for sure.
Both are fun though, but in their own way.
I was in Josh's Discord server and told everybody to come over and watch us. And then Josh pointed out that I didn't give him a link. So Dad is yelling at me.
Dad is yelling
Oops,
at you.
I thought you. Oh well.
Yes. Well, we all have that mutual love of disaffected here.
Yes, we do. Well, absolutely. Josh is one of my his appearance is one of my highest view counts for in fact it might be the highest view count for a Monday Night Musing. And I think it was mostly because I thought people are like, isn't he gay?
Isn't he gay?
Yes, he is.
How can you have gay people on? You're not gay. And I'm
Yeah. Well, now you have double that here. Two
Well-
gays on. You've outdone yourself.
We now outnumber you.
Yes.
You're outnumbered.
Well, I had
Careful, it's contagious.
I had Dykes on the right on too.
We had them on too. Yeah.
Love those ladies, Jen and Meg.
Jen and
Shout
Meg are
out to
amazing. And I'm working on putting together a roundtable from for all the Gays Against Groomers that they like to have in their spaces on Twitter. And I told them I'd love to have them on the show because I like to cause as much cognitive dissonance as possible in the political realm. You know, I want the left to hate me and I want the right to hate me at the same time. And the best way to do that is to bring on right-leaning, conservative, libertarian-minded gays and lesbians. Literally, you can watch both sides of their brain. You guys remember the really old 80s movie Scanners?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it's like. Just their brain just go.
Yeah,
Classic.
we're similar in our approach, and it's not like we're going out of our way to make anyone like hate us. It's more like we're going to just be honest, and we're going to talk to whoever we want to talk to, and sometimes who we talk
Yes.
to will anger people on the right, but more likely it usually angers people on the left. But it's not a matter of us trying to say please one side over the other side.
We're just having conversations that we think are interesting with people who we want to talk to.
Yeah,
and
We're kind of politically moderate too, so it's like I lean right on certain things, conservative, and other things I'm a little more liberal. And it's just I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If anything, I think the majority of people are probably actually that way.
No, I agree. It's 100%. And you know, I tell people constantly that I'm paleo-conservative, and of course, when you throw that, and even paleo-libertarian, but when you throw that paleo-conservative aspect out there, people immediately jump to this conclusion that you're walking around in some sort of strange German-style uniform, throwing the Sig Heil out there, and I'm like, you guys literally don't understand what paleo-conservatism is. You know, I had written a guest article to a local newspaper, a guest commentary to a local newspaper here in relation to something that happened in a really small town that's close to me. The city had gone after a guy for clean up his property, you know, because no one can tell you how best to live your life than when the city manager writes you a letter and says, we don't approve of what your property looks like. You need to fix it. And the city manager is openly gay. And it's a really small town in southeast Minnesota. So it's there again, there's some cognitive dissonance. And the person who the city manager wrote the letter to decided the best way to respond to this, like an idiot and an ass, was to paint in rainbow colored letters disparaging comments about homosexuals and in particular the city manager. Well, of course, this prompted in the small little, I live in the poorest county in the state. I live in the largest city in the poorest county of the state. We're at a whopping almost 2,700 people. We don't even have a stoplight in our town, okay? And
2,700 is not a lot.
no, not at all. But we don't even have. We're about to have our first roundabout though. So, so this moron does this, of course, which then provokes a hate crimes investigation into him. And I'm like, well, hold up. Shouldn't do what he's doing, but he has a First Amendment protected freedom to say even asinine things, and he shouldn't get prosecuted for it. And so I wrote this, and made it clear I don't approve of that kind of rhetoric, if you will. but he has a right to do it, and we should all be defending his right to do it. And this lady wrote a response, and she was going to send it off to the letter as a letter to the editor, and she looked me up on my social media, and she's one of the first things she did when she sent the message, she goes, well, I see you're a paleoconservative. And I'm like, okay, well, you people are the rise of the alt-right. And I'm like, have you ever and she could not understand it, and that's what made her take pause. Instead of firing this letter off to the editor in response to my guest commentary, she had to write and communicate with me before anything else to find out how I could say that he had a right to say what he said, even though it was wrong, and how I could take both those positions. And you could just hear the initial conversation causing the gears in her brain to work in a way that they had never worked before. And we ended up having a great conversation, but it was just, her first response was to want to hate me.
Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, they just fail to see the nuance, and that there is nuance in people's views and our perspectives on things. It's not always like a black and white position on something.
It also,
and they're expecting that.
It takes a minute to sort of elaborate a nuanced take on a complicated issue, right? You can't just like somebody sees, like this happens to a lot to Billboard Chris, like people see his sign and they have an emotional reaction. Yep. And then, I've watched him have these conversations with people and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. And they like slowly come around and then like realize, oh, he's just like a dad talking about things in a very like sort of matter of fact way. And they just had, they had an impression because they see a tall white dude, bald head, blue eyes, in a suit with a billboard on, yeah. And that in and of itself is enough to like evoke an emotional reaction.
Then during those conversations, he'll say certain things that disarm them, and you can see that look that he's talking about the gears
and
turning
then
in their
head. Tone changes.
Well, he'll say something like, for example, he'll say, "Oh, well, some boys are more feminine, and some little girls are more masculine, and they're beautiful the way they are." And that just throws them off. They're just like, wait, what? It's like, wait,
can't really disagree with that.
They can't, because he's not, he's not saying anything that's like mean or controversial, and it throws them off. But also at the same time, it's dispelling these gender theories, right? That because a girl is more masculine, she has to be the opposite sex, and vice versa.
Well, it's just Looney Tunes. It's all Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Well, it's the old trope of you put two little boys into a room with nothing but Barbie dolls, they will make guns out of the Barbie dolls in a heartbeat.
Most of them probably will, yeah.
These days, they'll make guns out of the Barbie doll in a heartbeat and put a dress on to look like Annie Oakley while they're doing it. So you, the Discord server the other day, someone was giving Brently a hard time for looking like he wasn't old enough to even have a podcast, and
that's a compliment,
right? And so, how's a gay guy from Pennsylvania end up in New York doing a podcast with a guy from Jersey, talking about issues that have caused you no end of consternation with the that forced teaming of all the amorphous large scale monolithic gay mindset you guys are supposed to have but don't. How did you guys end up getting started and teamed up on this?
Consternation's the correct word. That's a 5-point word right there too.
Yeah,
I don't know, Brent.
I had therapy just before this, so I'm using all the big words. So.
Well, Daniel and I were dating for like a long time, and then COVID happened, and both of our income sources dried up, and we were like, well, gee whiz, what are we going to do now? And so everybody was starting a podcast, and we were actually having like a series of really interesting conversations just with our neighbors, with my sister. She was here at the time with her boyfriend. And our neighbor and a couple of different neighbors, and we were just having these really interesting conversations. And a couple of my sister's friends who are a little bit more like liberal, young, like wealthy,
pampered leftist
females leaning left, they had these emotional reactions. So we would have very strong opinions about the legality of the lockdowns, about the particular mandates and things like that, and of a conservative nature. And so we were accused of dangerous rhetoric because, our positions, they claimed that our positions were, dangerous because if people adopted them, it would put their safety in jeopardy. And so,
And this was in particular about the COOF pandemic measures that were taking place.
yeah, that's pretty much where it started.
That was definitely the major spark. I would say that like lit the fire in us. But Brent and I have always been very outspoken.
I was doing a
type of
solo
people.
channel Before. It was called It's Brently. It was on YouTube, where I did sort of a Tim Pool style analysis. I started that in 2019 because I saw drag kids trending on Twitter, and I was like, no. So I was like, as a gay man, I need to, put my voice out there, because the straight people need to know that this is not all of us, because otherwise it's going to come back. Like, people forget that like 5 minutes ago, like, gay, adult, homosexual male was synonymous with predator. And they're like working real hard to bring that association back with these like story numbers and stuff.
I wouldn't say it's funny that you say that, but it's apropos of a conversation I've been having with an individual, and in particular, I brought up you guys coming on tonight, and we were talking about that the mindset, you hear homosexual, you hear gay especially, and the first thing is, even still, predatory, even though statistically the person most likely to in a sexual abuse way to prey on kids statistically has always been white evangelical men.
I think by the numbers, it's actually, there's more like heterosexual adult man
That's
on
because there's more of them.
young girl.
That's because there's more of them. But what I will say is, perhaps ratio-wise, there might be a higher ratio,
a higher per capita version, or not version, but
and it's not like there isn't a problem in the whole homosexual gay world with attractions to underage people and that sort of thing. It does happen. There's a lot of abuse that takes place, grooming, that sort of it happens, absolutely.
Josh has talked about it a lot.
Josh talks about it all the time, and that's not unfounded, that stuff. There's a reason that the whole predator pedo stereotype gets associated with us. But
I think Harvey Milk was dating like a teenage boy.
I don't know.
At one point.
I don't know too much about Milk's past in that way, but what I will say is the danger here is just painting everyone in a particular type of group, or who is a particular way, with the same brush, because then, going back to our earlier point, nuance, you lose the nuance. You want to take each individual.
Also, predators will use
individual
homosexual
identity,
identities to conceal their predatory aspects if that's the way that they lean. Like, we've seen numerous cases of married gay men who then adopt kids and then abuse them. I mean, it's not like an epidemic, but it does happen.
Yep.
And
there was that recent story too.
There's always, once a year, there's like a really nasty story that pops up where this is caught in an example. But, and it happens, and they use anything to hide behind it. They use it as a shield. And then that forces the rest of us to either, pretend it's not happening, or to call it out and be ostracized by, the community. But really, there isn't like a community. There's no homosexual monolith. There's just people that happen to be gay. And guess what? Like, surprise, those people have a wide variety of opinions and philosophical beliefs and approaches to life, just like every other group of people.
Yeah, and for every one of them that makes the sexuality part their identity, there are other ones like us who don't view that as our identity.
You mean you don't walk out and immediately introduce yourselves as like, "Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm gay." That's not.
No, I don't do that. And if anything, one of the
Brently does all the time. I mean,
I sashay out the front door. Just, hello, world. I am here.
Oh God, Brent.
I am queer.
If anything, one of the things that
you're not. You do not meet the queer standard anymore.
I can be a little queer sometimes if I want to. I used to find it really entertaining and kind of fun, and then people started trying to get kids to do it, and I was like, wait, what are you doing?
You know what's really bad is I think we interrupted Daniel's. Daniel
No,
probably had a deep substantive thought, and
I did
we
have
screwed it up.
substantive thought, but,
Sorry.
So now recall that substantive thought.
what I was going to say was, if anything, when I was younger, one of the things that really worried me about coming out to people that I knew in my life was that they would like just view me that way, like, and define me in that way, like, oh, that's gay Dan, instead of just Dan, the individual. You know what I mean?
The person who they've known for years.
Yes. And that would somehow define me. And I didn't want that to be the defining thing about who I was. Neither did I want to hide this part of me, because obviously it's a part of you, and you want to have romantic relationships, and you want your family to meet your partner and all that stuff. That's a whole thing. But I didn't want that to be the thing that I was known for, like, if that makes any sense. So it was one of the things that worried me about coming out was that. And then, later on, I learned more about the gay community and LGBT and all that stuff. And then I realized there's a lot of folks who they want to be defined by it. They want that to be the thing that their life sort of revolves around: the sex, the sexual identity, pride, all of that stuff. And it's not me. It never was really. I never quite fit into any of that. So there wasn't much for me to walk
for a
away
number
from.
of years.
Yeah, well, Brent was all involved in the scene. I wasn't really in that scene,
I can tell you stories.
No, don't tell me about the scene. I really don't. I don't want to hear about anybody's scene.
Have you
okay?
ever been to
Nope.
Folsom?
No, this straight man does
San
not need
Francisco
to know
Street
about
Fair?
Folsom. Stop.
You don't want to know.
I know about Folsom. Yeah.
The first time I was walking through Folsom, I only went once. It was 2010, 2011. And I was walking through the crowd in my harness and my little shorts. And frolicking around. I have a huge spliff hanging out of my mouth. And,
So juvenile.
there's women
you would
dressed up as
never do that
horses
again.
over here. There's a dude chained up on the fence naked over there. There's a fisting demo happening.
No.
Gosh. And in front of me, I see the most cutest young family, mom and dad probably in their 40s, and 3 little kids, probably 15, 12, and 8.
Where are the cops?
And they're all huddled together, and these smiles are plastered on their face, and they're just walking through the crowd. I'm like, what are you doing?
They accidentally stumbled into that, probably.
I don't think they did.
I'm afraid to say something. They might eat us.
That's probably what it was.
I'm just are you lost?
Yeah, I don't know.
Says the guy in a harness with his his short shorts on. Goes, I'll lead you out. Trust me, it'll be perfectly safe.
And the accent is
your gay voice is pretty on point.
I've been working on it.
I've been working on it.
It's the only way I can get Josh to agree to come on.
That's so funny.
Fun.
I bet you never do it again.
No, I haven't been back to Folsom.
No, you're on the most wanted list now at Folsom, but not for the same way everybody else is. Your picture's if he shows up, we're gonna tie him up, but not that way. We're gonna
Not that way. That's so funny.
So you guys start talking about this. Your friends and and acquaintances are you guys are dangerous, and next thing you know, you're kind of intermixing with other people who are moving out of that forced teaming. Carrie being a perfect example of it. Carrie coming from the hard left, Josh coming from the hard left, and you're finding a community. And I hate that term.
I heard it in Josh's voice.
I heard it in Josh's voice when I said community. Yeah.
I was like,
I think he's going to owe us all some promotional ads for this. So
yeah, we
he still owes me a coffee commercial.
Does he? That's so funny.
Oh, I bet you do a good one.
Yeah, well,
I want him to do one, a voiceover while
coffee.
Yeah, some coffee. I'm wanting him to do one, doing a voiceover as I package the coffee up. And I could just imagine what he would do with that. So,
but so earlier before we came on, you did mention the name. You talked a bit about the name of the show, and
yeah,
yes, there's definitely an irony about it. That is kind of the point. You know, what is dangerous rhetoric? Really, it's any way of speaking or any topic that the woke left finds to be
inflammatory,
controversial, violence. You know, they love to say words are violence, all that stuff. And it really did come from a similar sort of experience that you described that happened to you, of being accused of that. Like, that rhetoric is dangerous. Like, talking about identity politics, speaking out about the lockdowns and the mandates and all of that stuff, people would tell us that's dangerous rhetoric. And
challenging the results of certain contests that you can't talk about here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certain contests is a good way to put it.
You can't say anything more.
You can't even say
No, you can't even say. You
Nope,
can't.
nope.
Yeah, nope. Say no more. That's why I still refer to it as the coof, even though they're not as bad about it. It's so ingrained, and which is really funny too, is because like I'll be talking to some, like a cashier or clerk or a non-unionized employee of a store,
Regular person,
like a regular person at Aldi, and I'll say, so how did you manage to get through the coof? And they're like,
no idea what you're talking about.
yeah, the what? I'm like, that virus. It's just such a part of me to not even say it, because it's dangerous rhetoric.
Yeah.
It when you challenge any of those narratives, it's such a dangerous.
CommuTube does not like you to question Daddy's narratives.
But I guess I'll pick off from where Brent left off and the whole origin story thing. Initially, the idea wasn't even to have a podcast. That wasn't what we intended to do. So yes, everything shut down. You know, our incomes sort of dried up.
So you guys lost work.
Yes. Well, I was a substitute teacher and schools were closed for a while. So people like us were not working. And when they did open back up, I didn't want to go back into that because I refused to wear a mask and I refused to do any of that. I refused to get up in front of students and to pretend like everything was okay.
Lie to them.
Yeah. And then, Brent was doing Airbnb for people vacationing in the city. And he was also tutoring, and a lot of that dried up for quite a long time as well. Your life changes in direction. You're like, all right, now the rug has been pulled out from under me. I don't know where the hell I'm going. I don't know how long this is going to last. Immediately, Brent and I knew 2 weeks is bullshit. We were like, no, there's no way this is going to be 2 weeks. They're going to drag this out. We knew that from the beginning. We called it because we don't trust these people in power. We've always been those types.
They've also been trying to do this for years.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that we just assume like, oh, this is going to end. We're like, no, this is a serious thing. They're trying to like literally change society right now. And we can get into all, the different various theories of why they did what they did, but that's a whole nother thing. The point is we didn't trust it and we were speaking out about it pretty early. But the plan wasn't to have a podcast, like I jumped back into art. I put another book out of poems and I did that. Brent's sister jumped into her art. She was doing that because we were all stuck inside. Like there's nothing really to do. And artists, that's kind of what we fall back on. We're like, all right, well, I have all this time on my hands now, and so let's just make things. So that was what I was doing. But we were also having these conversations online, and we were posting things and arguing with people and all that stuff. And it kind of, and like Brent mentioned earlier, we were also having these long form discourses with people in our lives, our friends, talking about everything that was happening. And after a while, just the idea made sense. We were like, well, why don't we just start a show where we can talk about this stuff, but have it documented, like so other people can see it. But also we kind of got tired of repeating ourselves on the internet, on Facebook, on Instagram. It's like we could just reference an episode and be like, hey, we already talked about that right here. Instead of
I don't want to talk to you about this. Just go watch my show.
Yeah, just go watch my show instead of saying the same thing over and over and over again. And that was one of my motivations for it. So, fast forward a bit, it's the end of 2020. We'll say around December 2020, this idea has been brought up. We already knew, like, all right, we want to do this. What's this going to look like? We don't know. Initially, Caitlin was supposed to be part of that more too, but she had her other things going on, Brent's sister. But we talked about it. I came up with the name because people kept calling, accusing us of that. I'm like, Dangerous Rhetoric is a great name, and we just stuck with that. But we didn't actually launch the show until April of 2021, and a lot of things happened in the interim. So the main thing being January 6th. that was
That's
our
the other thing we're not allowed to mention. But go ahead. They've already taken down my
Depends how
ad
you mention
suitability,
it.
so
I
that's
mean,
fine. That's
we've talked about this before quite a few times on our show, on other people's shows as well. So I'll try to give like the short version of it. Hopefully, I'll try to keep it short. Our first journalistic adventure, we'll call it, was to go to DC on January 6th. This was really Brent's idea. He was very adamant about it. We knew they were going to lie. We're like, whatever happens, we know it's going to be a big thing. It's Trump's last hurrah, whatever. And whatever happens, we're like, the mainstream media is clearly going to lie about it and spin it. So that was the motivation, was to just be on the ground, have eyes and ears, and see witness it for ourselves, what
Right.
goes down. Brent was very adamant about going. I was like, this is a bad idea. It could get crazy. Who knows? Antifa, them could show up and they could, things could get violent, clashes, all that stuff. But he was like, no, I'm going, whether you go or not. And I was like, all right, well, I'm clearly not letting you go on your own. So we rented a car, we got an Airbnb, we went over there and we documented. We talked to people, we recorded videos, took pictures, all that stuff. We weren't in the building or any of that shit. We had nothing to do with storming the Capitol or any of that bullshit. But it doesn't really matter. Once you're there and you admit to this sort of thing, you post pictures, you're on people's radar. People stopped associating with us. Immediately, some of them, and then they really stopped associating with us when the end of January 2021, the FBI showed up in New Jersey looking for me specifically at my current residence at the time. I was not there. I was here in New York with Brent, and I get a call from my brother like, dude, the FBI just showed up looking for you. And they actually went in my house too. We have a friend who was a tenant there, and he stupidly let them in. So they went upstairs, they spoke with my grandma, they scared the crap out of her, they asked a whole bunch of questions, they knew about Brent, they brought him up, and my grandma's just like, what is this? Like, my grandson's not a criminal, he's an artist, like he didn't do anything wrong. And most of the questions, she's just like, I don't know. And then they left. They did not leave a card. So that was kind of weird. And when we called the different offices, we called the Newark office in New Jersey and the one in New York. But when we talked to the guys in Jersey, they were like, well, that doesn't sound like us, because they should have left a card. So you have a way to reach out back to them. And they didn't. So they even warned to like call your local police station, because maybe it's someone like staking out your house or something like that. So I did. I called the Elizabeth Police Department and gave a sort of heads up and said, hey, 2 guys showed up looking for me. They claimed they were the FBI. I wasn't there. I don't know. They didn't leave a card, so I don't know what's up with that. And they didn't really know what else to say besides like, let us know if anything happens. But fast forward again, I disabled most of my social media. Brent was still on his, but I was like, I need to step back from this and kind of reassess, right? Because it affected me directly.
That's a freaky feeling.
It's weird. What hurt me the most wasn't like whatever, if they're going to show up, they're going to show up. Like we were in the apartment for like a whole week. We didn't leave. We were just waiting for them to show up here, ring that buzzer. But what really affected me was that my family got dragged into this.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hurtful, like shit, like my actions, the things I chose to do brought them into it. And that was kind of like a turning point for me. And I had to really consider like, all right, well, are we going to do this show that we talked about? Are we going to keep being loud and outspoken, or am I going to kind of like back up and maybe go live a quiet life? We obviously chose the latter. We ended up in Florida, so we left the city for a bit in March of 2021, and we went to stay with a friend over there who had a place to put us up and some work to give us to kind of, earn our keep. And that was actually where we started the podcast. And
did you end up on a ranch? Were you working on a ranch?
We were on a barrier island.
Our friend had a beach house, and he was like, why don't you just come down here for a while and see what happens?
Get away from the city, clear
Get out
your
of the
head.
city. Because at the time, like, we were second-class citizens in New York. We couldn't enter certain like establishments
because you weren't complying with the jab.
Yes,
correct.
We refused to take an experimental substance into our bodies and to prove that we did it.
Okay. So so we went down there and we worked on the show, and then
You guys are like an old married couple.
they nuked my solo channel in November of 2021, and we've just been trying to grow DR ever since with interviews. We've been branching out to like on the street type content. I've been going out we went out on Pride with Billboard Chris, Kerry, Mikey Harlow, and we like had really interesting conversations with people on the street on New York Pride about, you know, the sterilization and mutilation of minors.
All that happened later, though. That was when we came back to New York.
Yeah.
You're skipping some of the story.
What did I skip?
Well, we were in Florida. That was where we launched the show. It wasn't here in New York. We launched it in Florida, you know, on this little beach town, Barrier Island, and in a room over there that we got put up by a friend. And we were like, all right, let's do this. So initially it was just Brent and I talking, you know, bringing up stories, news, all that stuff, and just shooting the shit about world events and ranting about what we thought about stuff. And then we started to bring guests on. Our first guest was a tattoo artist, actually. His name was Mike Ryan, and he ran this little tattoo shop in the Bronx, and he was defying the mandates. He was getting fined by the city because he was refusing to force people to wear masks and all this stuff, and to social distance, because you can't do that when you're tattooing someone. And also, tattoo artists know a lot about sanitation and all of that. And he's like, guys, this shit is dumb. It doesn't work. You know, he's like, when I use a pair of gloves to tattoo someone, I don't take that pair off, put it aside, and then take that pair again and put it back on the tattoo of a different person. And he's like, that's what we're doing with masks. This is dumb. It doesn't make sense. So we did that. And then we talked to Danny Presti, who was another business owner. He had a bar in Staten Island called Mac's Public House. And they were the first business to defy the mandates and to refuse to close. And they got hit with all types of fines. He lost his business.
He was harassed by
the police. They try to, you know,
the I can't remember which police. It was like the state police or something.
Was it the sheriffs?
It was weird, like the sheriffs,
Yeah.
the county sheriffs,
Yep.
because they responded directly to the mayor's office, and the
Yep.
mayor was really, really mad.
They made up a whole story that he broke a cop's legs and all this stuff trying to get away, and because they cornered him and tried to arrest him, and he ran into his car and tried to drive off because he didn't know these were cops. Like, he had no idea. He thought these were people who were just out to get him. So all that played out, turned out to be bullshit. Tucker Carlson brought him on and got his story because, you know, Tucker's great, and he's probably the only one who talked to any of these people during that time. So we brought him on, and then I think Christian Watson was our next guest. And then after him, we never did another solo episode with just me and Brent. The show just became that, where we would bring someone else on to have a discourse with them instead of just him and I shooting the shit. And that wasn't how we intended it to be. It just kind of transformed that way.
You know what's funny is you guys are now going out and doing man on the street
Yes.
stuff, where my very first day, the very first day of my channel, I was going out and doing the man on the street, and it morphed into doing more,
Yeah.
bringing people on, you know, or talking to, you know, it's
I like it all.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
again, January 6th was our first like little adventure, and we did go with the intention of documenting and talking about that on the show that we planned on starting.
I should
So
put that footage on the website.
you
It's on
should.
the
So
website.
you could argue that it actually did start out
It's on Rumble though.
with man on the street approach, and it wasn't going to just be a podcast. And we also knew, like, we didn't just want to talk politics either. Like, I knew that from the beginning, at least. Like, I knew I also wanted to talk culture. I wanted to talk art. I wanted to bring musicians on. I wanted to bring all types of people
We also
on.
like to talk about aliens.
Aliens, all that weird shit. Like, love it. Like, we didn't want to restrict it to just like, oh, okay, COVID stuff and gender issues.
That's boring.
Well, we talk about that stuff a lot, sure, but to just talk about that stuff, I think it gets tiresome. It's exhausting.
It does.
It's depressing.
You gotta have a little variety. You gotta spice it up. You gotta
mix it up.
talk about aliens.
Yeah.
You gotta talk about, you know, gender. You
Yeah.
gotta talk about history.
So we've had musicians.
Music.
We've had musicians on. You know,
which you are a musician.
I am. I play drums. Yeah. I'm not like professional. I'm not in a band right now or anything, but I consider myself a musician. We brought my friend Andy Thomas on, who was in a band called Black Crown Initiate, and he's in a band called Rivers of Nile right now. And we talked about how the mandates affected musicians at that time. So we found a way to culturally tie those two things together. We brought on Paul Masvidal, who's you could go Google him. He was a well-known musician in the early founding of death metal and prog
He's
metal.
a hot metal dad.
Yeah, he was in a band called Death, and he's in a band called Cynic. Lovely man, and I was shocked when he even talked to me. So, like, the show has been wonderful in that regard, and just networking us with so many interesting different people, that some of whom I never would have even imagined I'd be speaking with and having conversations with. So that's awesome. But we didn't know, we didn't know what would happen. We were just doing this. The motivation wasn't
Isn't it funny though when you reach out to people, you're half expecting
Yeah.
like either like they won't see your messages or whatnot, and then you do get responses like I have another series I do called Libertarian Lowdown, and my very first episode of that was Spike Cohn, and I'm like, how do I get seriously? And I mean it's connections, but now I'm like I've
Yeah.
had Mike Termat on who's running for president, and he's coming on again this week to give an update about his run for president. And it's just you just reach out and you ask. You just
Yeah.
go, hey,
That is it. But you have to be sincere,
yeah,
don't just be sincere and don't pester people. If they
right,
know you, if they say no, just move on,
yeah,
The first guest we had that feeling with was definitely George Alexopoulos. And that he appeared on our show episode, I think 16.
16, 18.
We had like no followers. We had barely 100 subs. It like
Not
no
even-
one knew who the hell
We did not
were.
have 100 subs.
Yeah, we had barely, right? We probably didn't have 100 subs.
Maybe like
Yeah.
80.
So
at that point in
I had tweeted something at him, I think about like NFTs or whatever on one of his comic strips, and we had a little exchange, and then I just invited him on the show, and he said yeah, and I was like shocked because I was like, bro, we don't have like a audience or anything at all.
He's not gonna want to be on here. No one's gonna see him.
Yeah, so he probably, you just don't, but you shoot your shot, right? And you never know, and as long as you're sincere, you never know what's going to happen. And he's been on another time since then, and we've even hung out with him in person before, and he's a lovely man, so he's become a friend. And it's just you can't predict those things, as long as you're sincere,
what's
doors open.
it was kind of like I reached out to John Ziegler after his thing on Sandusky and Penn State, and he was like, sure. I was like, oh. It's like, okay. And we're talking about a guy who is on CNN and MSNBC and all of that, and it was the same thing when Josh and I had communicated before, but I had reached out to Josh and said, hey, I'd really like to bring you on so to introduce you to my audience, and he was like, okay. And now it's like I tell people this is my I'm gonna go listen to my friend Josh's show, and they're like, well, you guys are actually friends, like, I'm like, yeah, we're friends, damn it. He calls me fatty pork chop.
He was someone recommended to us by one of our like Facebook friends who frequents a forum that Brent and I frequent, where we talk about all types of crazy stuff.
Shout out Tom Simpson.
Shout out to Tom. And Tom recommended Josh to us because Josh appeared on a show of some other friends of ours, Harrison
Mind
Cayley.
Matters.
Yeah, Mind Matters.
Okay, yeah.
So he spoke with
It's a great podcast.
Harrison Cayley, and that was, we watched that episode and we were like, this guy's awesome. So we immediately invited him on, and then ever since then we've been watching Disaffected. We've been fans of it. So, and yeah, we've hung out with Josh and spent time with him too. He's a lovely man. He's a recluse.
One of you may or may not have been involved in an event in Burlington where there may have been some mockery or potpourri mockery, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Brett was there twice. I was there once and participated in some aggressive stickering. It was very aggressive.
I've had
Oh, it's getting loud. Sorry.
no, it's you guys live in a city, so I don't, but we still get sirens. Mostly, it's like to rush over to old folks' home and
Yeah, every once in a while.
lift
So
somebody off the bed.
it's like a couple of blocks up the avenue from us. So we get a lot of that randomly. Also, there's a pretty major intersection. So it's like,
It makes me feel like I'm watching a New York-based movie. They always have those street sounds in those movies to make you feel like you're really there, and it's not actually happening.
it's really like this is just a studio, and that's actually just a backtrack.
Right.
I'm really
like
just playing these audio sounds.
I feel like I'm watching a remake of The Professional with Natalie Portman in it when she was little. You remember? Yes,
Wow.
another classic.
I knew the girl was gonna go far when I saw that movie. I was like, that little girl is amazing.
Yeah, I felt the same way about Kirsten Dunst when she was in an interview with a vampire, and I'm like, she's kind of washed out now. So.
Another one, and then Ed Norton in what was that movie? where he was like the abused boy with the multiple personality disorder. Primal Fear.
Oh my gosh, that's a throwback.
I was like, Edward Norton is going to be
I don't know if I've seen that.
huge. And then Fight Club came out like a few years later.
So what has it been like for you guys? Not with the show, but what has it been like for you guys now interacting with people, and they when you're walking down the street, people just don't, unless they have really strong gaydar. It's not like it's just, oh, hey, that guy's gay. But when you're interacting with people and they find out that you don't have a leftist ideology, are you finding yourselves ostracized from that particular segment of society more so, or is that not coming up as much, or are you now well known as not being the quintessential New York urban gay?
Well, Daniel really never had like a lot of like gay friends, but I had a bunch and I lost them all, like almost
You're gonna
all.
lose all of
You
them.
don't know, you have other gay friends now.
Yeah, well,
almost
you
all.
have new ones now. We have like the homo cons and the basic.
Yeah, we
gays
made a lot of
and
new
all
friends,
that
but
stuff.
I shed a lot of people over the coof because of my rhetoric.
So it was mostly the coof rhetoric that caused you to shed a lot of those.
And Jan 6, dude.
And that too.
For me, that was the big thing where people disappeared from my life after that. After that FBI visit, and I didn't even mention the second FBI visit when we were in Florida. They showed up.
Oh, so they tracked you down there.
Oh, they showed up again in June of 2021, and this time they were specifically looking for Brent. But they showed
Yes, I answered the door in my towel, and then I came back with pants on and recorded the whole thing.
Yeah, we recorded that incident and we posted it everywhere because by that time we had already decided, like, well, look, we're doing this. And if they show up again, we talked about it. We're like, we're definitely going to record them and we're going to put that on blast and let people know, like, hey, the feds are still harassing us. So they left us alone ever since then. But yeah, after that whole thing, man, like people who I've known for years, like since I was a kid, didn't hear from them again. And I could probably count on one hand how many people actually like reached out to me and said like, oh my God, Dan, I saw what happened. That must be so scary. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, I know that sucks, Nope. And a part of it is because the way the media was painting everyone there with this brush of insurrectionists and dangerous people and all that stuff. They don't want to be associated with that. Even if they still like you, they don't want other people. You're
dangerous.
Yeah. Well, they don't want other people to dislike them. So they kind of have to fade away. Because,
it was
by
very
association.
effective psyop.
Yes, very effective psyop. And
I had an aunt who was helping me find a job because, after the coof and the lockdowns, I needed income. And
the heck you say?
Once she found out that I was down there, just doing journalism, talking to people, interviewing people in the crowd, taking just, shots of the event. She like ghosted me on the job help, and that was the end of it. So I haven't spoken to her since. My dad's sister. God. But whatever, like, people fade out of your life for different reasons, and then other people fade into your life. And when the good Lord closes a door, he usually opens a window. So we'll see.
Do you and there's so much similarity between both of you in your unified story, but even individually, and my story. And do you ever take a step back and ask yourself, did those people cut me off, or did I cut them off and I didn't realize I was doing it?
It was both.
Okay.
There was definitely some mutual stuff there.
Sometimes, you outgrow people, or you grow in different directions, like branches on a tree. It just some people you grow towards some people, and then you grow away from others, and that's just the natural course of life.
Yeah, well, I let definitely some things just fade with people because, again, while I was going through all that, like my first initial reaction isn't to reach out to every single person that I know and be like, hey, this happened to me. Hey, this happened. It's like they see my posts, they know. So really, it's like, who reached out to me? That was kind of the telling thing, is like, who reached out to me to check up and be like, I saw that's happened to you. That's terrible.
You
I'm
mean
sorry.
you didn't contract with one of the billboard companies in Times
No.
Square that say, "Hey, based gay, tune in now." You didn't.
Stay tuned in now, or like the feds are after me, you know, or whatever. Like, no, that's not what I did. But it was like the whole thing was a great litmus test, you know, not just that stuff with the FBI, but yeah, the COVID shit, speaking out about the mandates, becoming more outspoken about the Second Amendment, those sorts of things.
Especially in New York. That's a good way to get shot.
Absolutely. Like Brett and I, like we just got more just
Not
whatever.
really.
We just our mentality was kind of fuck it at that point. We're just like we're gonna just say whatever we want, be who we are. We're brandishing guns on the internet and being like, guns are great. Second Amendment is awesome.
In Florida where it was legal.
But the point is, people in my hometown and people who knew me, who are probably more liberal minded, or maybe not, but just afraid of being associated with that. They see that shit, and they're just like, wow, what happened to Dan? Like he's become unhinged now. Like he went off the
You're
deep
so
end.
alt-right, ultra MAGA.
I was a little unhinged, but for the most part, I was like, I wanted people to think that. I actually got joy at knowing that some people I knew and used to work with and were friends with looked at those posts and were like, holy shit, he's gone off the deep end. He's crazy now. It brought me great joy. I thought it was great. I loved it.
We did a little trolling.
It's a little bit of trolling, but part serious too, Yeah, we became very pro Second Amendment.
Do you think that because there is such a monolithic view of gay culture that you almost have to troll if you're not going to continue to be forced teamed or lumped into that perspective, that if you don't come out out of the closet as a centrist or even a conservative, people will just say and do things around you that completely fly in the face of what your personal beliefs are, and you either are forced into a position to bite down and accept it, or almost just walk away and not tell them why you're walking away. If you're, I don't know if you almost have to be bold about it.
Yeah. And the language you use too about like coming out, I've heard other people describe that, like the gay full-blown conservatives have said that for them it was very much like that, like coming out. Like we have Brian Cloudis on. He does theater. He worked with James O'Keefe on the Oklahoma show, all that stuff, and he got canceled by a whole bunch of people after he came out as a Republican. And he said it was like coming out of the closet. Same with Chadwick Moore. Like he was on Tucker Carlson all the time. He came on.
He's still banned to this day from some bars in Brooklyn in his neighborhood.
Like all the bars, basically. Like most of the gay bars in his neighborhood, they know who he is because he's on Fox all the time. So he's like persona non grata over there. Like he can't even go in the gay bars and get served, that sort of thing. It's like a coming out. And some people do it formally, like Chadwick wrote a whole article, like why he was coming out as a gay conservative. Other people, you just start posting stuff and people figure it out on their own.
And now being conservative and traditional is like what it was like. Yeah, it's countercultural. It's punk rock. It's no longer popular or trendy. It's the anti-countercultural position.
Yeah, so, saying family values are good, for example. That's like rebellious now. Like family values.
When you hear
we should have more of them. Like
when you hear a gay man or a lesbian say, "Yeah, a child is better off with a mother and a father in the same home," you almost have to stop and wait for the fire to happen. You're just like,
clutch my pearls.
Yeah, there you go.
It's obvious. It should be obvious that children need a male and female role model in order to understand the world around them. We're a male and female society. You're either going to be a male or a female, and you need somebody to model the behavior, and you need somebody to model your mate. And from there, the child learns outworld. So whatever your parental dynamic is, the apple don't fall from far from the tree, is what my dad used to say. And so your parents make such an impression on you as a young person that you use that in order to understand the world and people's relationships out from there. So that first relationship between your mother and father is so important for you kids to understand their place in the world and thus themselves, that we can see now what happens when you have that get all messed up. We have this generation of kids that are just like cuckoo bananas town, they don't know what gender they are, and the teachers are affirming it, and it's a mess.
Yeah, well, worse is when you have not just like neglectful parents or like an absent parent, but like Josh Slocum's situation, when you have like an abusive parent, like a cluster B personality parent and that sort of thing. Like, I think he's correct, and we're seeing the results of those sorts of households spill out into society as a whole. And even, to take it further, that like our relationship with like daddy government and mama government is similar. It's like being under the thumb of a cluster B personality disordered parent. Especially
like
with
how it is
the lockdowns
with,
and mandates. That's what
with
all
YouTube.
that was.
There's like certain things you can't talk about, or they'll just turn you off.
Yeah, mama will get mad and lock
you're gonna walk around them on eggshells on those topics. You're like, ooh, can't talk about it. Can't say that here.
But his whole thing with as in the home, so in society, totally on point. Like, he's so correct about that, and I think it's the most important. Probably, I think his show's one of the most important shows out right now. And
I second that. I'm
so underrated.
I am constantly moved. I mean, one of the first times I ever communicated with Josh, I was out on administrative leave, and I was discovering a lot about myself with that downtime, as I couldn't tell anybody what was going on outside of some core family members and some very close friends who I knew would not just go blurting it out on the social media. And I was listening to the first 4 or 5 episodes of Disaffected as I was doing, yard work and landscaping, and he's going through and describing what growing up in his home was like, and I was identifying with so much of what he was saying that I literally stopped and was sobbing on the wall of my garden, like a vegetable garden area. And the only way I could communicate to him how much it had impacted me was to take a picture of myself with tears rolling down my face, telling him, and I did. I said, your show is one of the most important things I have ever listened to, ever discovered. And it was, and I meant it. And I still do to this day. I constantly telling people, no matter what their ideology is, they're describing things that are going on in their lives with people that they're interacting with. And I'm like, what you're describing sounds to me like a person who would be diagnosed with this.
Yeah.
Go listen to the first few episodes. If you never listen to them again, which I always encourage everybody to continue to listen, but if you never listen to anything else, listen to the first few episodes, and inevitably every person comes back and says to me, I can't stop listening.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that what was compelling, absolutely, and a little addictive, and incredibly hilarious. Now that
he definitely has his own sort of sense of humor, and I think you need that too, because his show, as well as ours, deals with so many heavy subjects, really like depressing shit, and it does get tiresome to talk about all that stuff. You have to inject some levity into it, or we'll go nuts. We'll go insane. Like, and it weighs on us, and it weighs on Josh. There was last time we were in Vermont, he said something to me while we were talking. I don't want to be doing this. He said,
right.
Like, I want to just like be home, like stay away from people. He loves his cats and his lamps and all that stuff. And I guarantee you that is what he would be doing if he didn't feel so strongly about the things he was seeing in society and seeing himself in those kids and what's happening and all of that. And so there's a fire in him that makes him do that, but he doesn't like enjoy it. It's hard on him. It's a lot.
Isn't that too, when you meet somebody like that? When I first started interacting with Brently and watching what you guys were putting, having out on social media, even without having a conversation, I'm like, there's something in the soul of this person that resonates with me. And when you meet those people, the Josh, Carrie Smith, I had Christopher Aaron Felker on, and I'm going to be actually re-releasing his appearance on my channel onto my channel. We streamed it to Twitter because at the time I was a bad boy and Daddy was punishing me on YouTube.
We're gonna have Christopher on too at some point.
And
Actually, we should lock him in soon. Get that
and
put out.
I meet these people, and it's Carrie is another great example. And other people who you would never dream of having any interaction with, just absolutely just you. One of the perfect examples of that for me was a guy who my entire interaction with him prior to the launch of my show had been me as a detention deputy and him as a detainee. Absolutely, he despised me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely despised me. And then I launched my show, and he's interacting with other people who kind of shared some of the same philosophical mindset as me, maybe a little bit different, but maybe a little bit more angry. And I can get pretty angry. But he was interacting with these people and calling them out and sicking Antifa on them. And then I started to interact with him just over the last year, and he's gone from being an angry left-leaning black guy, hardcore like Antifa, BLM black guy, to his Twitter handle. He lists himself as a conservative in the city, in the Twin Cities. And now when we interact, it's like you can't tell there was ever a problem.
It reminds you too, and it is important because I know it's not always the case. A lot of people don't, but people can change. They can. It's harder for some than others, and some might be so fixed in their ways that there is no hope. But people can definitely change. Like Daryl Davis is a great example of this. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's the guy who basically talked, I think it's like 200 at least or something, like KKK members.
It's at least triple digits.
At least triple digits to hang their robes up and leave and change their views just by talking.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, now I know who you're talking about.
Just by simply having conversations with them, showing like, hey, I'm a person, and then treating them like a person too, instead of just dismissing them and yelling and all that stuff. And he was able to get a lot of these people to walk away from actual white supremacist beliefs. And it's like, that's powerful. His story, I would love to have him on the show. He would be an awesome guest to talk to.
I think one of the places where I've run into the most isolation and pushback, but also some of the most encouraging moments for me, and I'll give this because I want to hear that from you guys as well, has been, strangely enough, getting people's minds to open up beyond their normative socio-political, socio-cultural perspectives. Conservative Republicans being, back the blue at all costs, and left-wingers being, all cops are bastards, which ironically now we're finding that the left-wingers and the normie cons, as I like to call them, are all uniting in their support of law enforcement these days, which is just terribly funny. But getting people to the point where I joked earlier about getting the left and the right to hate me. But there's a lot of truth. They don't know how to deal with me. And I have had former friends and family members go, when did you stop being, backing cops? I said, it's not that I don't back cops. I just think it's time for people's eyes to open, the scales to fall off.
They're not above criticism.
Right.
Can criticize the police without saying all police are terrible people.
Right.
They are people, and we talk about that on the show too. Like, there's a person behind that badge, behind that uniform. There are people, but you also have to remember that often, these people will just do the wrong thing to simply follow orders and do their job. And you have to remember that. Like, look at the lockdowns and the enforcement of the mandates. Like, cops have to enforce that shit. So yes, they deserve to be criticized for that as well. Did they all do it? No. I mean, I remember there was a situation, I think it was the Italis gym in New Jersey situation where he refused to close, Ian Smith, and he got hit with all these fines by Governor Murphy. And I think the first time they showed up to try to forcefully shut them down, the police actually backed down and they refused to do it. So like there are cops who I think will defy orders, but not all of them. A lot of them, they're afraid of losing their job too, right? So if they're getting something that's
they'll make you I don't know why I would say this, but they'll make an example of you. I don't know. So each of you individually, and in whichever one of you wants to go first, feel free to tell me what moment through all of this, especially as it relates to your content and to your show and whatnot, what moment has been an encouraging, eye-opening moment for you in all of this? Where have you run into a situation where you're like, okay, it's been worth it?
There's been a lot of examples of that, but I think I'll go with a recent example, and that was when we had Tara Rodas on, who was the Project Veritas whistleblower who volunteered for the HHS, for Department of Housing. What was it? Department of
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services. And she
in the
volunteered.
unaccompanied alien child program.
So she got stationed in Pomona, California, in a refugee
Pomona,
a refugee emergency reception center there, where they were taking in these unaccompanied migrants, and they were then sending them off to sponsors, who were sponsoring them to take them in. And she started to realize that the sponsors weren't being vetted. Some of them were appearing on transnational crime organization lists. And some of them, you had multiple sponsors sponsoring.
She got that tip off from Aaron Stevenson.
Yeah. Well, we talked with him too, and that kind of elaborated on the whole situation. But, some of them were like sponsoring multiple kids at one address, or the same sponsor was using multiple addresses to sponsor kids, that sort of thing. And she realized, like, wow, these kids are being trafficked, and they would
She was also talking to the kids themselves,
too,
who were basically describing labor trafficking.
Yeah.
They were being brought up from Guatemala and, promised work. They're making $250 a day down there. They're being promised like $6 something up here.
Yep.
And, they're trafficked by the cartels and brought in, and then they're put to work on a farm or in, some sort of livestock situation.
Yeah.
They do night shifts. They work construction.
Yeah, and some of them die on the job.
And they can be injured. A lot of them don't speak English or Spanish. A lot of them speak a native like Mayan dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes them incredibly difficult for them to access resources
or advocate
reviews.
For themselves.
A lot of them don't know that they have rights now that they're here. It's not like they're told, and nobody like sits them down and explains it to them.
You mean the people abusing them don't find a translator to tell them about all the freedoms and liberties?
Yeah. And then once these kids are delivered, they sort of disappear, and there's no follow-up. There's no investigation. Nope. It's much more likely that a Project Veritas investigator or some member of the press will knock on somebody's door before they knock on, before it's a member of like the Department of Homeland Security or the FBI. Mm-hmm. There have been a couple of high-profile busts. There was 2 big New York Times articles over the last like 6 months. One about a bust of, I think, 100 underage minor alien kids. They busted, I think it was in like Ohio or Illinois, somewhere out there. And then more recently, there's been a more in-depth article about just kids all over. I think the kid that they highlighted was from Florida, doing like construction. And, they're 15-year-old kid just working to try to survive.
Didn't he fall to his death?
Different case.
But, conversations like that are incredible.
Sounds like that one really impacted you both.
Absolutely, because it's something that's not really being talked about. Like, no one's really talking about that. And as important as the trans stuff is and what's happening to the kids in regards to that, like, these kids are also being hurt. And just because they're not American citizens doesn't mean that it's not equally as important. It's fucked up. It's messed up. And yeah, that stuff impacts me when I talk to those people and hear the actual testimony from people like Tara. And recently, last week actually, she appeared before a House Judiciary subcommittee to testify to them that this was happening, and which is great. But also it goes to show like how little is being done about it, because our little podcast had her on first getting that testimony before even Congress was able to hear it directly, so it's an issue that's not being talked about enough. And yeah, after those sorts of talks, I feel like obviously it's depressing, but I also feel lighter, like, wow, I did a good deed, like I'm trying. I did my part.
Such a good deed, do it, Daniel.
It's impactful, it's so important. Impactful. You feel like wow, I'm actually trying to make some kind of difference to fight the evil in the world, instead of just sitting back and not doing anything. So those things, yeah, they leave a mark on me. And we've had other conversations like that for sure, but that's one of the more recent ones that I can think of where I walked away from it feeling like that was important.
You know, it's really weird too, because you never know who's not in a weird, you know, surveillance state way, but you never know who's watching. And uh, I had that I had a situation yesterday. I went to document a local Republican town hall, and I'm walking in, and the gal walks up. She goes, "Hey, you're TC," and I'm like, "Mm-hmm," because I'm no good at it. You know, to this day, I'm still like, "Yep, that's me." And they, "Oh, I've been watching your stuff ever, before the sheriff tried to get rid of you," and I'm like, "Oh." Uh, and
That's
you
fine.
kind of warm
Yeah.
up to these conversations at first, because you never know what, like, okay, you're gonna shank me or what? What's
Is she
going
gonna
on here?
stab me?
No, I'm not TC. That's no. But you're wearing his hat. Yeah, I mugged him. It's
No
but
hero.
Yeah, I think
stabbing.
we've only had like a couple experiences like that so far. One I can think of was last April actually. We were in Texas for the Better Discourse conference hosted by Myth Informed.
Yep.
And at the after party, which was awesome, like, we met Josh for the first time.
Rub it in. Thanks.
It was fucking, it was fun,
great,
dude.
Dan.
But
I'm sorry. Can I mute you and not
mute me. So this couple, this older couple, like middle aged. I didn't recognize them because I guess I had never seen their pictures on Twitter or whatever. But they came up to me and they were like, "Hey, you're Daniel from Dangerous Rhetoric," and I was just like, "Yeah, I'm taken aback," because at that time,
that's Carol and her husband.
Carol and her husband, and I had, we had even less subs and followers back then.
They've been following us forever.
Yeah,
they gave us money back before anyone else.
It was just
did.
really
They're sweet.
It was sweet.
Very
It was
sweet people.
It was a nice feeling to have someone that you've never even met like come up to you and recognize you for what you're doing and thank you for it and say how important it is and all of that. So I hope it's more.
That happened to me at Aldi a few months back. A guy walks up, he's looking at me, and I'm like, "Oh no, it's either going to be a guy that used to get in trouble a lot, and he's looking at me, he goes, Black Robe Regiment," and I'm like, He goes, "I watch all your stuff," and I'm like, "Where's my family?" When I, because they're like, "You're just you."
Watching like, right now. He's gonna be that's me in that story.
I was like, where's your family when those moments happen? The spontaneity's ruined if you got to say, "Hey, can we reenact that for my kids?"
Yeah.
Like, so it's an interesting thing to be not, recognize like you're important, but just for people to go, "Oh, hey, I like your stuff here. I like your content," or thanks for doing what you do. And I'm like,
exactly.
I just talk, bro. That's all.
Yeah.
How many kids you got?
I have 2 adult children and 2 granddaughters.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
I'm jealous.
Oh no, don't be. It just means you're getting old, Dan.
Just means I'm getting old. Yeah,
it means you're getting.
Seriously though,
don't tell him that.
Don't take that stuff for granted, man. And I wish more gay folks spoke out in that way and admitted this. But a lot of us probably won't ever have kids. We're not going to have the traditional family, and I think it's from my personal perspective, it's something that I tell people who do have kids, as someone who doesn't and probably won't, to not take that for granted. It's a beautiful thing. It's very important. And, Peterson talks about this all the time. Jordan
Thank you
Peterson.
for continuing the species.
Yeah, thank you for continuing the species. But also, like most people you ask, even very famous people who have done great things and they're recognized and notable and all that stuff, if you ask them what's the most important thing in their life or the most important thing they feel they've accomplished, most of those people will say, my children, my family. And that's an important thing, never take that shit for granted.
The greatest thing in my life are my kids and my grandchildren. And the biggest mistakes I've made were all with my children. So like there's a positive for you. You don't have to worry about that then.
Yeah.
So,
that's true. There's a silver lining there.
But yeah, but I think that can go to any of your close-knit relationships. Is don't ever take any of that stuff for granted. And I think the last couple of years have really driven that home for a lot of us on different levels. People who have passed.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
People. I have a friend. She co-hosts a series on Rumble with me. We call it Behind the Curtain, and it's about the particular set of guidelines that were given out by the federal state about how to treat a particular virus and
Mm,
how ineffective that's been at treating that virus, but it's
mm,
effective at taking those people out.
mhm.
Um, but she lost her mom to that same set of protocols, and
Yeah.
there's not a day that goes by, I know for her, that she's not impacted by that loss.
Yeah.
And we all lose people, right? We all we to death. Family members die, close friends die. The older you get, the more often it happens. But you don't realize how much you can lose and how fast you can lose it until you get to a time frame like we've been in over the last couple of years. And all of a sudden you're losing people in an unnatural way
Yeah.
because you're dangerous. Your rhetoric is dangerous, your perspective is dangerous, and like you guys said so eloquently at the beginning of the conversation, people are afraid of that because it might reflect poorly on them. And all
Hmm.
they really want you to do is just go back to being who you go. Can you just be Daniel again? Can you just be Brently again? And or can you be TC again? And I'm over here
Can you
going,
just stop talking about that thing that
yeah.
I can't hear you talk about?
And I'm like, this is who I am.
Yep.
This isn't just something that happened to me in 2020. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. You just didn't want to see it because we were comfortable before. And now your comfort's been shaken. And the person I am now makes you even more uncomfortable because you're not willing to take that stand and speak out.
Yeah.
And that hurts a lot of people.
I think there's something to that. I think deep down, a lot of people probably feel that way, and it makes them uncomfortable, and like they're gonna have to live with that. Like I see people ask all the time, like what would you have done during World War II, for example, in Germany, or like would you have been a Nazi? And this is one of the things I love so much about Jordan Peterson and his lectures when he talks about totalitarianism and those periods in history. It's like he just lays it on thick, and he says it like it is. And statistically speaking, yeah, most of you probably would have been Nazis, statistically speaking. And we want to think the best of ourselves. Most people do. They want to think that, like, oh, if I was, in Nazi Germany at that time, I would have been hiding, Anne Frank in my attic, and I would have been the one who's. It's like, no, you would not have been, statistically speaking. You probably would have been reporting people and all of that. And that whole situation proved all of that to be true. How many people really stood up? Not very many.
It's amazing that you brought that up. I had never heard Peterson say that. But I just had that conversation with somebody on Friday, and it led to my black pill video for Friday. Last week was my a very bad black pill week for me. All things. I mean, I'm not surprised considering all the anniversaries that were creeping up. But I had that exact same conversation with this person because this person just walks around and talks about how they're going to resist and they're going to stand up and they're going to do all this, and I'm like, yep, you're so tough. It's so easy for you to talk about how you're not going to take the jab because you don't have to worry about it right now because all that stuff is gone. But what about like here living in Minnesota with all the massive gun control legislation that's literally about to be signed into law? What if they look at you and they show up at your house and say, does your neighbor have guns? And you say, well, I don't know. Well, we know that you know, but we need you to report on them. Will you do it? No, I'd never do that. I said, what if they tell you if you don't report on the neighbor and they find out that you knew, that they would haul you away too? Would you hide your neighbor to avoid that? Well, yeah, for a while. And I'm like, well, what if they come to your house and they say they know that you are hiding your neighbor, and if you don't turn your neighbor over, they're going to take you to the camp too. He goes, well, if it came down to me or them, then yeah, I'd turn them in. I said, you would have been a Nazi. And oh my gosh, it was like, no, I wouldn't. I'm like, you literally just said you would. You literally just, well, that's different. I'm like, how's it different? It's not different. It's all about your comfort. And sometimes it takes having those conversations with people, as painful as it is and as dangerous it can be to, relationally. It's really important because no one's saying that to these people because, they're more interested in boycotting Bud Light, which, by the way, I just want people to know I've always boycotted Bud Light because if you're drinking Bud Light, you're already halfway to being Dylan Mulvaney already anyway. But
Damn.
But
I couldn't tell you the last time I had a Bud Light.
Yeah, I don't really drink beer often.
Yeah,
so.
I'm not a beer person.
But just to bounce off this point a bit more, like I think it's equally as important to see that in yourself and to ask yourself those questions and
Absolutely.
to acknowledge, like, how far would I go, and to acknowledge that, like, hey, that darkness is in me too. I very well could have been a Nazi, and statistically speaking, if I were in that time in those circumstances, I probably would have been,
Also,
but like I said, we want to think the best of ourselves. Everyone wants to think like I would have been the one to stand up. And well, when history comes knocking at your door, like, you're going to be tested. And this this whole period that we lived through was like one of those tests. And who knows what can happen next and how worse, things can get, and how far are you going to be willing to take it? It's an important question to ask other people and yourself.
Kyle Serafin, we had him on the show. He's an FBI whistleblower on Project Veritas.
Working on getting Kyle on too. I had Steve on.
Great. One of the things that he talked about on our show was action beats reaction. So find your line, find the thing that you will not do. Figure that out in advance, and then, work backwards. Okay, when that happens, what's my plan? How am I going to react to that? Whether it's an injection mandate or whatever it is, and if it's a gun grab, if, whatever the line is where you will not tolerate, find it in advance, and then form a plan so that you know what you're going to do in that scenario. Because if you don't, you're going to be caught like a deer in the headlights if that dreaded thing ever happens.
That's right.
You'll get there, and you all of a sudden you'll be stunned, and the outcome will be far worse for you and your loved ones. It's especially important for patriarchs and matriarchs, moms and dads. Figure out this stuff in advance to protect your children.
Yeah. Well, that was definitely one of the biggest things that really pissed me off about all of that shit that went down, is how many parents just laid down and took it and let their kids be masked in school, let their kids get these injections.
Well, a lot didn't, though. A lot pulled it out. A lot did.
Sure, a lot.
We had record numbers of new homeschooling happening.
But a lot did. And it's like, dude, you failed to protect your kid.
Well, most people are authoritarians. They'll roll over for authority.
They'll roll over and even let their kids be basically abused by the state.
Yeah, well, that's what happens.
We've been conditioned to comply to statism.
Yes.
And I point this out frequently that, the Republicans right now just love to scream and holler about the authoritarianism of the left. And I'm like, it's just two different brands of the same authoritarianism.
That's right. Hello. 5 minutes ago, George W. Bush.
Right. That analogy you were talking about with Kyle saying, find that place where what your hard and fast line is I've been telling people over the last 3 years. Like the issue is that none of you know where you'll stop letting them draw the line on you. And they keep drawing the line and telling you not to step over it. And then you step backwards so you don't step over it. And they keep pushing you back. And they keep drawing that line in front of you and telling you not to step over it until the only place that you have left to go is your back's against the wall. And you can either say, I'm not going to step back anymore because I can't, or you go down on your knees to take a bullet in the head. That's all that's left with most people. That's all that's left. And they look to these political saviors on either side and think that they're going to step in and save them, and they don't realize that the response. We're not talking about Christian theology here. We're talking about socio-political reality. The only person that you can count on in those moments is yourself. You have to have that in your mind well ahead of time about what line you will not cross. And most people have never taken the time to think about that, about where to say enough is enough. I always use the analogy of Gandalf as the Balrogs coming out of the pit, trying to come over the bridge. None shall pass. Yeah. Are you gonna?
Well, that's also like an essential. It's an essential function of masculinity in the culture. It's an essential function of males in the family, is to put the foot down and say no, to say that you are in excess, child or madam, and this is unacceptable in the home or in public, and we will not tolerate it. And should you, continue to advance in this manner, there will be consequences.
Which also lends to another point here and goes to show like the degree to which masculinity has been kind of stifled in our society and
labeled
demonized,
toxic,
all that stuff. In the
been
beginning,
emasculated.
maybe not later, but in the beginning, when people started standing up against the mandates and all of that stuff, I frankly saw more women doing it, and gay men, people like who aren't supposed to be as masculine, right? You know, we're not the ideal men or whatever.
And the reason gay men can speak up is because we don't need to have sex with women.
Well, and also most of us don't have kids and families, so that's a big factor as to why, you know,
we're expendable.
Many people took the jab and things like that just to keep their job, whereas folks like us, we didn't have that sort of thing weighing upon us with a family to take care of. And that
Brently, you are not expendable.
We'll just be
there is only one of you. And thank the good Lord in heaven, there's only one of you.
It'd be bad if there was more of me.
But yeah, in the beginning, it was definitely, I noticed a lot of moms and stuff were standing up against the mandates and that sort of thing. And more men came later, but there was definitely a period when I was just like, where the hell are the men? Why aren't these fathers showing up at the school board meetings and stuff? And saying, no, my kid is not wearing this shit on his face. And no, he is not taking this injection. I absolutely say no. That's my kid.
My friend Sarah is watching. She's local to me here. I've gone to some of the school board meetings in her school district with her, and she's heard me say this, and I said it to the men in their school board group. Like, men, you need to step up, because it was women taking the lead, and you know, I applaud the women that are, you know, the mama bear types that are out there speaking out, but it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic that it has to be the women. Where are the guys? You know, and as you said, they've been emasculated and, you know, castrated, and, you know.
Well, even the ones who are still masculine, I think a lot of them they're afraid to express that because they're afraid of how they're going to be.
They're going to get shouted down.
Yeah, shouted down by this, you know, overly sort of feminized culture. And Josh talks about this stuff all the time too on his show on Disaffected, like
the gynocracy.
Like, dude, like the woke stuff, a lot of that is being pushed by women and HR departments and stuff. He is correct about that, and they need to, you know, women kind of do need to come to terms with that. And they'll say, oh, well, where are the men, and why aren't they standing up for us and stopping the trans stuff? And it's like, all right, well, a lot of them are afraid to, because you labeled them as toxic, so that's why they're not. And also, you got to like recognize, like, your sisters are the one over here pushing this shit to erase you. Like, you're women, the concept of a woman is being erased, and it's mostly women who are pushing the erasure of that, because they have that more nurturing, coddling demeanor, statistically speaking. And the Be Nice program, just be nice, you know, we want people to feel included and accepted. And that's what's pushed a lot of this woke shit, is that Be Nice program. Whereas you need more of that assertive, masculine, statistically speaking, persona and demeanor to stand up and say, well, no, put your foot down and be like, well, no.
There's a limit.
There's a limit. And a lot of them don't feel comfortable doing that. And that's the sort of dynamic.
I am not nice. We had a conversation in the Discord server. We had a conversation in the Discord server yesterday. I shared a video from a little bit of undercover that I did at a local restaurant about something yesterday, and one of the people in the Discord server was like, "You're so nice, so much nicer than I am." I'm like, "Oh no, you get what you give from me."
Yeah.
And if you come at me and you're decent and civil and polite and respectful, you're going to get decent, civil, polite, and respectful. Absolutely. If you come at me like an authoritarian, or you're rude or disrespectful, I got videos that show you just how I'll treat you. And Sarah can attest to that too at school board meetings. But guys, I really appreciate you coming on. Call it a collab or a conversation, whatever you want. I've been waiting for this. I told Brently a long time ago we needed to do this, and we finally got around to it. But I love your guys' content. I love your passion. I love what you do, and I'd like to see even more of you guys. Let me rephrase that, because I forgot who I was talking to. I would love to see, you know, more of your content out there and see my audience. I wondered if it was going to sink in. See my audience. No.
She'll do it. She's on the internet all the time.
Just go on my Twitter. You'll see those.
But I want my audience to be able to plug into what you guys got going on, because I do believe you bring a perspective that I can't bring just from a lot of the roads that you guys have walked down. So individually, where can people find you, and individually give us a closing thought?
Yeah. So you can find me at Dan Delafe on Twitter and on Instagram. It's the same handle, DANDELAFE. And if you want to follow the podcast on Instagram, it's Dangerous Rhetoric, at Dangerous Rhetoric, and on Twitter it is at Dangerous Rhet, RHET.
You have a closing thought?
Closing thought. Well, first of all, thank you for having us, and
Thank you for coming.
this was an awesome conversation, and we definitely need more people like you who are willing to have these conversations, because people are afraid to talk about these things. And the more, ballsy men and women standing up and having the dangerous discourse, right, that is considered a taboo, I think the less likely we'll see things escalate in this country to a level where I certainly don't want to see
I
them.
don't think we should say ballsy women these days, because that's
Ballsy.
more apropos and true than we care for it to be. So
You can find me on Twitter a lot. I'm
yes,
at Papalist
incessantly.
there. That's hard to find. So if you just want to find me on Twitter, you just go to the Dangerous Rhetoric page, follow that, and my handle is linked on there. I'm also on Instagram. I do like short little blip videos, sometimes like 60-second on like something that's like a hot topic. I do them on Instagram and TikTok. Instagram's at It's Brently. And I forget what the TikTok is. I think it's also at It's Brently.
You don't want to give us your Grindr profile?
Your grinding.
I don't have one of those.
I've never had Grindr.
haven't had that since like 2014,
it's
15.
It's actually _Brently.
That one, yeah. And closing thoughts. Oh, geez, I don't know. See, my brain gets fuzzy at 10 p.m.
At 10 p.m.
Just, do your best to be thankful. Live every day, as it could be your last, because you never know when it will be your last. And I'm always
you never know when we're going to get swatted by the FBI.
Right, that too. That could happen any moment.
Seriously.
Probably not so much now after Tucker released the footage. Jacob Chansley got released. So I think if he's been released, I don't think they're going to be busting more people for that craziness. But I am curious to see what happens with the House Judiciary and the House Weaponization of the Federal Government Committee. They're also doing a look back on the coup response. I'm very curious to see where that goes. Also, where Tara Lee Rodas's testimony goes, if there's any revision to our immigration system, because what they're doing with these kids is the equivalent of modern day slavery, and it's really a big problem. Also, the same thing with the gender bending of the youth. It's criminal, it's child abuse, it's wrong, and I would encourage everyone to speak out against it as often and as loudly as you can, without causing yourself undue difficulty. Maybe a little difficulty, but not a lot of difficulty, because I know some people are in a precarious, delicate position.
I second that.
Not the TC level of difficulty, because trust me. But so next big show coming out. All of them are big. That's you. That was a trick question, Brently. That was a trick.
Prisha. We're supposed to talk to Prisha.
We are going to talk to Prisha. She's another D-trans person. She's a woman. And she recently appeared to give testimony in the Project Veritas 3-part series on a nationwide investigation of gender clinics.
Affirmation generation too?
She was an affirmation. I think she was an affirmation.
I believe she was an affirmation.
I can't remember, but she's been speaking out for a while, and we've had quite a few D-trans folks on the show to get their perspectives and get to know who they are as people and all of that. And we have another big guest who I'm going to work on lining up soon. But
we can't drop that T yet.
I can't really drop that T right now, but it's just say
it's going to be.
Go ahead, tease without anything. That's fine.
Yeah. It's going to be very controversial.
It's going to be controversial,
and we're going to present a very unpopular side of a story that has.
Well,
been...
I'll say what the story is. It has to do with the events that played out at Project Veritas.
And, she's giving that T.
Yeah, I'll give that T. The events that played out there, and James O'Keefe's exit and their split. And we're going to talk to someone about that and get the other side of the story. And I imagine that's going to shake the apple cart and piss a lot of people off on the right. But, we don't.
Oh, well.
So
truth matters.
Yeah.
If you can make the left and the right both mad at you at the same time, you have accomplished great things.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Guys, you go get out of here. I'll close up, and you guys can, I know it's 10:10 there. So bedtime.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
it's
Well,
almost that
thanks
time.
again,
Thanks
and
a lot, bro.
we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
I
Thanks.
appreciate
We'll talk to you guys
everyone.
in the. Thank you.
Bye.
Daniel and Brently from Dangerous Rhetoric, and I am pleased to have had them on. My friends, if you haven't checked out their content, you need to. It is phenomenal. And we talked an awful lot about Josh Slocum and Disaffected. If you have not listened to Josh's content as well, it's seriously one of the most, if not the most important socio-political commentary in the United States today. If you are not challenging yourself and listening to people that you wouldn't normally listen to because they're gay, they're lesbian, they're whatever, they have funny hair color, whatever the case might be, they've got piercings, they've got too many tattoos, whatever it is, you need to expand your horizons, because the only person that you're hurting when you're not listening to people that you wouldn't normally associate with is yourself. And you could be hurting that person. I said this in my Black Pill video the other day. You could also be hurting that person because maybe you're the person that's going to open their eyes to what's wrong with their ideology. So if you appreciated this content, folks, head over to my Subscribe Star. You can pick a level of support there. Folks, I'm going to be honest with you. I need it. It helps me keep the internet on. It helps keep the electricity going. And all of us have sacrificed over the last few years. And there hasn't been any place where I haven't sacrificed a ton since I decided to start doing this. And I've lost a lot of friends, lost family members, and the career that I had was a good career, and it was taking very good care of me. And I sacrificed because I couldn't hold my tongue and just go with the flow. And that's what you heard from Daniel and Brently tonight. They couldn't remain silent either. We need far more people like that. We need more Brentlys and more Daniels and more Joshes. We need more Carrie Smiths, and we need more Kyle Serafins and Steve Friends. We need more people like that. We don't need more me. We need more people like those people. That's what we need more of. We need you to break out of the mold of your comfort and impact the world around you for the better, to have hard conversations, to say and do hard things. And, as the old saying, or not old, but the saying goes from an old dystopian book that said, hard times build hard men build easy times build soft men build hard times. We're in the hard times right now because too many men have been soft. It's time we get over it. It's time we get over our comfort. It's time we get over our peace and our ease and our sanguinity. We need to be over the tranquility. We need to be willing to say and do hard things. Because if we're not willing to say and do hard things now, we're done as a republic. So, my friends, without any further ado, until next time, fight for your freedom, it is yours. Fight for your liberty, it belongs to you. In Sic Semper, Tyrannus.
We are go for liftoff in T-30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at